I'm Charles, I'm 32 years old, and my entire family came to my home, not for a visit, but to demand I sign away my life's work to save my golden boy brother from ruin. Before I tell you about the moment their jaws hit the floor, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. The air in my workshop was thick with the smell of freshly cut oak and something else. Desperation. It wasn't mine. It was rolling off my family in waves. My father, Richard, stood in the center of the room, his expensive suit looking completely out of place against the backdrop of my lathes and saws. His face, usually set in a mask of stern disappointment when he looked at me, was now etched with a raw, ugly panic. My brother, Marcus, the financial genius of the family, was slumped in a chair I had built with my own hands. He couldn't even look at me. He just stared at the sawdust on the floor as if it held the answers to the universe. His wife, Sophia, stood behind him, her arms crossed, her perfectly manicured nails tapping a frantic rhythm against her silk blouse. My mother, Helen, was positioned by my father's side, her eyes red-rimmed, darting between me and my father like a cornered animal. Then there was me, and my wife, Eleanor. We stood together, near the large workbench that was the heart of my studio. My father slid a thick manila folder onto the workbench. The sound cut through the tense silence like a gunshot. "Charles," he said, his voice strained, trying to sound authoritative but failing miserably. "We don't have time for games. This is everything your brother needs. You just have to sign." I didn't touch the folder. I knew what was inside. It was a contract to sell this workshop, this land, the only place I had ever felt truly myself. The land that had been in our mother's family for generations, gifted to me because I was the only one who ever cared about it. "I already gave you my answer," I said, my voice low and steady. I was surprised at how calm I sounded. Inside, a storm was raging. "Your answer is unacceptable," my father boomed, his composure finally cracking. "Family is everything, Charles. Don't you understand that? Marcus made a mistake. A big one. But he's your brother. You have a duty." A duty. The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My entire life had been measured against Marcus. His stellar grades, his Ivy League degree, his high-paying job on Wall Street. And my life? My passion for woodworking was seen as a hobby. My choice to live a simpler life was a constant source of embarrassment for them. "Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated us," I said, looking from my father's furious face to my brother's pathetic one. My father's jaw tightened. He seemed to realize that yelling wasn't going to work. He turned his attention, his full force of parental pressure, onto the one person he thought was the weak link. "Eleanor," he said, his voice dripping with condescending paternalism, "talk some sense into your husband. You're a smart girl. You must understand the gravity of this situation." Eleanor, who had been silent this whole time, took a single step forward. She was calm, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. She looked my father directly in the eye. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips as she spoke, her voice clear and cutting. "I think there's been a major misunderstanding here, Richard." Everything stopped. The way she said his name, without the respectful Mr. Blair or even Dad, sent a ripple of shock through the room. My father stared at her, utterly speechless. And in that moment, the story of how we got here, to this breaking point, began to rewind in my mind. It all started 5 years ago at a wedding. Our wedding. 5 years earlier. The day was supposed to be perfect. And in many ways, it was. Eleanor and I got married right here, on this land, under the shade of a massive, ancient oak tree whose branches felt like they were holding the sky up just for us. We didn't want a stuffy, expensive affair. We wanted something that felt real, that felt like us. We had hay bales for seats, wildflowers in mason jars, and a barbecue pit sending delicious smells wafting through the air. Our friends were there, laughing, dancing, celebrating our love. It was everything I had ever dreamed of. And then, it was time for the best man's speech. My brother, Marcus. He stood up, tapping a champagne flute with a spoon, a smug smile already playing on his lips. He was in his element, center of attention. He looked handsome in his tailored suit, a stark contrast to my simple linen shirt. "To Charles and Eleanor," he began, raising his glass. The crowd cheered. I have to admit, when my little brother told me he was getting married, I was surprised. I always thought his one true love was a block of wood. A few scattered, uncomfortable laughs rippled through his side of the family. My friends remained silent. But then I met Eleanor, and I understood. She's earthy. He said the word like it was something you'd find on the bottom of your shoe. I felt Eleanor's hand tighten in mine. I looked at her, and she gave me a small, reassuring smile, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. She was a brilliant environmental scientist, a woman who could name every tree and bird on this property, who felt more at home in nature than anywhere else. To Marcus, that just meant she was dirt poor and unsophisticated. He wasn't done. "They're a perfect match." "Really?" he continued, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "He plays in the mud, she plays in the mud." I remember when we were kids, Charles was always building things. Little forts, lopsided tree houses. I was busy building a stock portfolio with my allowance. More laughter from his cronies. But hey, to each his own. I guess some of us are destined to build empires, and others are destined to build birdhouses. The humiliation was a physical thing. Felt like a hot flush crawling up my neck. I looked over at my parents. My mother, Helen, was smiling weakly, trying to pretend this was all just good-natured ribbing. My father, Richard, had a look on his face I knew all too well. It was a mixture of disappointment and resignation. The look that said, "This is what I have to put up with." My failure of a son. When it was my father's turn to speak, it was even worse. He cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze. "Well," he started, "Charles has always been unique. He's chosen a simpler path. We wish him and Eleanor all the best in their endeavors." It sounded more like a eulogy for my ambitions than a wedding toast. When they finally sat down, the air was thick with awkwardness. My friend Ben leaned over and whispered, "Wow, your family really sucks, man." I couldn't even disagree. Later that night, as we danced under the string lights, Eleanor rested her head on my shoulder. "Don't let them get to you," she murmured. "It's not me I'm worried about," I said, holding her tighter. "I'm sorry, Ellie. I'm so sorry." She pulled back and looked me in the eyes, her gaze fierce. "Don't you ever apologize for them, or for us. What we have is real. Solid. It's oak," she said, tapping my chest. "They're just particle board." I laughed, a real, genuine laugh that broke through the tension. She was right, but even as I held her, I made a silent toast of my own. To family, I thought, with a bitterness that surprised me. And to learning who really has your back when it matters. I just had no idea how much it was about to matter. Fast forward 3 years. The memory of the wedding had faded into a dull ache, a constant reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. Marcus and his wife, Sophia, were hosting a summer party at their massive, sterile mansion in the Hamptons. We were, of course, expected to attend. Refusing would have caused a family war, and honestly, I was too tired to fight. I spent a week crafting the perfect housewarming gift for them. It was a small coffee table, made from a gorgeous piece of reclaimed cherry wood, with intricate dovetail joints and a finish so smooth it felt like silk. I was proud of it. It was a piece of my soul. We arrived, and the place was like a movie set. People in designer clothes sipping champagne, air kissing each other, their laughter sounding brittle and fake. Sophia, a social media influencer whose entire life was a carefully curated performance, greeted us at the door. "Charles, Eleanor, so glad you could make it," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. She glanced at the table in my hands. "Oh, what's this? How rustic." She took it from me like it was contaminated, handing it off to a member of the catering staff. "Just put this somewhere in the back, maybe the patio," she instructed, before turning her attention to a wealthier-looking couple behind us. I saw where the caterer put it, tucked away in a corner of the sprawling patio, next to a trash can. The entire evening was a masterclass in condescension. Marcus paraded me around to his finance buddies like a court jester. "This is my little brother, Charles," he'd say with a theatrical sigh. "He's the artist in the family. Works with his hands. Can you imagine?" One of his friends, a guy with a slicked-back ponytail, actually patted me on the shoulder. "Good for you, man. Someone's got to do the real work, right?" He said it with a smirk that made me want to punch him. Eleanor, bless her heart, tried her best. She attempted to make conversation, but her stories about a new soil regeneration project she was working on were met with blank stares and polite, dismissive nods. They didn't care about the earth. They only cared about what could be extracted from it for profit. The low point came when we were all gathered in the living room. Marcus was holding court, bragging about a recent investment that had netted him a huge return. "It's all about foresight," he declared, puffing out his chest. "You have to know which companies are dinosaurs, ready to fail, and which are the future." He then turned his gaze directly on me. "Speaking of dinosaurs, how's the whittling business, little brother? Still playing in the dirt?" The room went quiet. All eyes were on me. My face burned. For a second, I had nothing. My old fear, the one that whispered I was a failure, that my father was right, that Marcus was right, screamed in my ears. But then Eleanor's voice cut through the silence, cool and clear. "At least we sleep well at night, Marcus," she said, taking a calm sip of her water. "Without worrying about whose retirement fund we just gambled away." You could have heard a pin drop. Marcus's face went from smug to thunderous in a split second. Sophia gasped dramatically. My mother shot Eleanor a look that could curdle milk. It was the first time anyone had ever pushed back. The first shot fired in a war I didn't even know we were fighting. Later, as we were leaving, my younger sister, Laura, pulled me aside. She was the only one in the family who seemed to exist in the neutral zone. "Hey!" she whispered, her eyes wide. "That was intense. But she's not wrong to be worried. I hear things. Be careful, Charles. I think Marcus is in deeper than he lets on." Her warning was vague, but it planted a seed of unease. As we drove away from that soulless mansion, leaving my beautiful, handcrafted table behind in the dark, I couldn't shake the feeling that my brother wasn't building an empire. He was building a house of cards. And the wind was starting to pick up. Another year crawled by. The distance between my family and me grew wider. We stopped getting invited to the fancy parties, which was a relief. The only communication we had were stilted holiday phone calls and the occasional passive-aggressive text from my mother asking why we never visited. It was clear that Eleanor's comment at the party had blacklisted us. We had spoken a truth they weren't ready to hear, and for that we were cast out. Life at the workshop, however, was better than ever. I was getting commissions from architects and designers who appreciated my work. Eleanor was deeply involved in her research, spending long hours in her small lab at the back of our property, a place no one in my family even knew existed. They just assumed she was a simple gardener. We were building a life for ourselves, a quiet, solid life based on things that mattered to us. Then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Laura. Her voice was trembling. "Charles? Are you alone?" she asked, her words rushed. "Yeah, I'm in the workshop. What's wrong? You sound scared." "I am scared," she said, and I heard her take a shaky breath. "It's about Marcus. It's bad. Really bad." Cold knot formed in my stomach. "What do you mean, bad?" "Like, he lost some money." She let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Some money? Charles, he's ruined. I was at Mom and Dad's last night. They thought I was asleep, but I heard them talking. Marcus, he lost everything. Not just his money, his clients' money. Dad was talking about legal liability. He mentioned something about Marcus making a huge, leveraged bet against some new tech company, and it blew up in his face. My mind flashed back to his arrogant speech at the party. You have to know which companies are dinosaurs, ready to fail. He'd been so sure of himself. "Why are you telling me this, Laura?" I asked, my hand tightening on the phone. "Because they're going to come to you," she whispered frantically. Dad said you were the only one with a real asset. He was talking about the land, Charles. Your land. He said you owed it to the family. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it left me breathless. For years they had mocked this land, mocked my life, and now that their golden boy had failed, they saw it as their salvation, as something they were entitled to. He can't be serious, I muttered, more to myself than to her. He is, she insisted. Mom is a wreck. She keeps saying it's not Marcus's fault, that the market was manipulated. They're in complete denial. But they're also desperate. They're talking about selling their house. But it won't be enough. Marcus owes millions. They see you as the only way out. Suddenly, I heard a voice in the background of her call. It was my mother. Laura? Who are you talking to? I have to go, Laura stammered, and the line went dead. I stood there in the silence of my workshop, the sound of the rain drumming on the tin roof. The seed of unease Laura had planted a year ago had just sprouted into a monstrous, thorny vine, and it was wrapping itself around my throat. They were coming. After years of neglect and ridicule, they were coming to demand that I sacrifice my world to save theirs. And I had no idea that the truth of the situation was 100 times more complicated, and 1,000 times more satisfying than I could ever have imagined. That little tech company he bet against? At that moment, I still had no idea what it was. But I was about to find out. The summons came 2 days later. A call from my mother, her voice artificially bright. Charles, darling, we're having a family meeting on Sunday. Brunch. It's very important that you and Eleanor are both here. It wasn't a request. It was a royal decree. We knew what it was about. We spent the next few days in a state of quiet dread. We don't have to go, Eleanor said one evening, looking at my tense face. Yes, we do, I replied, shaking my head. If I don't face them now, they'll just show up here. I need to do this on their territory, then make it clear that it's the last time. Sunday arrived, gray and overcast, matching my mood. My parents' house, the house I grew up in, felt alien and hostile. The air inside was thick with a tension so profound it was almost a physical presence. Marcus and Sophia were already there, looking like they had aged 10 years in a few weeks. My father was pacing in front of the fireplace, my mother wringing her hands on the sofa. There was no brunch. As soon as we sat down, my father launched his attack. He didn't build up to it. He just dropped the bomb. Marcus is facing financial ruin, he announced, as if this was news to me. Through a series of unfortunate, unforeseen market events, he has found himself in a precarious position. Unforeseen. Couldn't help but scoff. Or just incredibly stupid? My father's eyes flashed with anger. This is not the time for your childish resentment, Charles. This is a family crisis. A number of Marcus's clients, good friends of mine, I might add, have lost their entire retirement savings. There is the very real threat of lawsuits. A lawyer is already involved. Marcus could lose his license. He could even face prison. My mother started to cry softly into a tissue. My son, a criminal, she sobbed. How could this happen? Sophia, for her part, was a statue of silent fury, glaring at Marcus as if she wished he would spontaneously combust. The potential for a very public, very messy divorce was practically radiating off of her. Then my father turned to me, his gaze pinning me to my chair. There is, however, a solution, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. An elegant one. The land your grandmother left you has been appraised. In this market, it's worth a small fortune. Enough to cover Marcus's losses and make his clients whole again. I stared at him, my blood running cold. He said it so easily, so casually, as if he were asking me to pass the salt. As if my home, my business, my entire life was just a line item on his personal balance sheet, ready to be liquidated. No, I said. The word was quiet, but it echoed in the silent room. What did you say? My father asked, disbelief coloring his features. I said no, I repeated, louder this time. I stood up. Absolutely not. You can't be serious. You spend my entire life making me feel worthless because I chose this path, And now you want to burn it all down to fix his mess? The empire builder? I gestured towards Marcus, who flinched. This is not about your feelings, my father roared, his face turning a blotchy red. This is about the family name. This is about your brother's future. Think of his children, their college fund. He should have thought of that before he gambled with other people's money. I shot back, my own anger finally boiling over. This is his mess. He can clean it up. My mother stood up then, her eyes pleading. Charles, please. He's your brother. We're your family. We're begging you. It's just a piece of dirt with a shed on it. What you do is a hobby. This is his life, his actual salary, his career. A hobby. After all these years, that's all it was to them. All my hard work, my artistry, my sweat and sacrifice, a hobby. A switch flipped inside me. The part of me that had always craved their approval, that had always felt the sting of their disappointment, simply died. I have nothing more to say, I said, my voice dangerously calm. We're leaving. I turned to Eleanor. Let's go. As we walked to the door, my father's voice, shaking with rage, followed us. You have until the end of the week to come to your senses. Don't you dare turn your back on this family, Charles. Don't you dare. I didn't look back. I just closed the door behind me, shutting them and all their toxic expectations out. The drive home was silent. The inside of our small truck was a bubble of quiet in a world that had just exploded. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. My mind was a chaotic swirl of anger, hurt, and a strange, liberating sense of clarity. Eleanor didn't press me to talk. She just rested her hand on my knee. A simple, grounding gesture that said everything I needed to hear. I'm here. I'm with you. We're in this together. When we finally pulled up to our house, I killed the engine but didn't move to get out. I just sat there, staring at my workshop through the windshield. It wasn't just a building. It was a sanctuary. It was the physical manifestation of my life's choices. Every beam, every tool hanging on the wall, every scar in the wooden floorboards told a story of who I was. And they wanted to bulldoze it. For him. They really don't see me, do they? I said, my voice raspy. After all this time, they look at me and they see nothing of value. They don't see you because they've never tried to look, Eleanor said softly. They see you as a reflection of themselves. And because you're not a mirror image of what they value, money, status, power, they think you're flawed. But that's their blindness, Charles. Not your flaw. She was right. I knew she was right. But hearing the truth and feeling it in your bones are two different things. A lifetime of conditioning is hard to shake. A part of me, a small, wounded child inside, still flinched at my father's anger, still felt the sting of my mother's disappointment. What do we do now? I asked, finally turning to look at her. Her eyes were clear and resolute. You already know what you have to do. The question is, what are you afraid of? I thought about it for a long moment. I'm afraid, I admitted, the words tasting like ash, that if I cut them off, if I say no for good, I'll be completely alone. That they'll finally have proof that I'm the selfish, worthless son they always thought I was. Eleanor reached out and cupped my face in her hands, her touch gentle but firm. You will never be alone. You have me. You have been. You have a life you built with your own two hands. And you are not selfish for protecting it. You are not selfish for refusing to be set on fire to keep them warm. They made their choices, Charles. Marcus made his. Now you have to make yours. Her words were like a bracing wind, clearing the fog of guilt and obligation from my mind. She was right. This wasn't just about a piece of land anymore. This was about my soul. This was a stand for my own life, for the value of my work, for the family that Eleanor and I had built together. That evening, I did two things. First, I called my best friend Ben and told him everything. His response was immediate and profane but ended with, "You tell them to go to hell. I've got your back 100%. Second, I called my father. He picked up on the first ring. "Charles, have you come to your senses?" he asked, his voice tight with anticipation. I took a deep breath. My senses are perfectly fine, Dad, I said, my voice as steady as the oak tree outside my window. I'm calling to give you my final answer so there is no confusion. The answer is no. I will not be selling my home or my business to bail out Marcus. It is not up for discussion. This is the last time I will say it. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then, a low, guttural sound of pure rage. You will regret this, he hissed. You are no son of mine. He slammed the phone down. I stood there, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. It hurt. It hurt more than I thought it would. But beneath the pain, there was something else. A foundation. Solid. Unshakable. For the first time in my life, I hadn't bent to their will. I hadn't broken. The days that followed the phone call were eerily quiet. The Cold War had officially begun. No angry texts, no pleading voicemails. Just a heavy, oppressive silence. It was the kind of silence that precedes a storm, and it put me on edge. I found it hard to focus in the workshop, my hands feeling clumsy, my mind replaying that final, ugly conversation with my father. I was sanding a piece of maple, trying to lose myself in the rhythm of the work, when Eleanor came into the workshop. She was holding 2 mugs of coffee, and she had a look on her face I'd never seen before. It was a mix of determination and something else, something I couldn't quite read. I think it's time you knew the whole story, she said, handing me a mug. I stopped what I was doing, confused. The whole story about what? About me, she said simply. About my work. About what I actually do in that little lab of mine all day. I had always respected Eleanor's privacy. I knew she was a scientist, that she did research, and that she sometimes consulted for academic institutions. She'd published a few papers in journals I didn't understand. I just thought of it as her passion, much like woodworking was mine. I never pried. She led me over to the workbench and pulled out her laptop. You know my field is material science, with a focus on sustainable polymers, right? I nodded. Well, for the past 6 years, I've been working on something. A new way to treat wood. Not just a surface finish, but a cellular level infusion. It makes any type of wood incredibly strong, fire-resistant, and weatherproof, all while being completely non-toxic and biodegradable. She showed me charts, graphs, 3D models. It was way over my head, but I could grasp the essence of it. It was revolutionary. Okay, I said slowly. That's amazing, Ellie. But why are you telling me this now? She took a deep breath. Because it's not just research anymore, Charles. 2 years ago, I secured some seed funding from a venture capital firm that specializes in green technology. I founded a company. It's called Timberforge Innovations. The name sounded vaguely familiar. I was sure I'd seen it mentioned in a design magazine somewhere. The company has been operating in stealth mode, she continued, which is why I've been so quiet about it. We've been perfecting the formula and filing patents. We now have 17 patents, both domestic and international. Our latest valuation from 6 months ago was $50 million. I just stared at her, the coffee mug frozen halfway to my lips. $50 million. My brilliant, humble, down-to-earth wife was the founder of a $50 million company. My mind was reeling. But why didn't you tell me? The question came out as a whisper. It wasn't accusatory, just filled with genuine, head-spinning shock. Because I didn't want this, she said, gesturing vaguely towards the world outside our peaceful bubble. I didn't want money to change us. I didn't want your family to suddenly see you differently because of my success. I wanted what we have to be about us. About the life we built, not the money we have. I wanted your success with your art to be your own, not overshadowed by this. But now they've pushed us. They've crossed a line. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine. They're about to make the biggest mistake of their lives, Charles. They think they're coming for a simple woodworker. They have no idea they're picking a fight with Timberforge. And they have no idea who actually owns this land. Eleanor's revelation changed everything. It was like someone had flipped a switch, illuminating the dark, confusing room I'd been stumbling around in. The fear and guilt that had been gnawing at me were replaced by a surge of adrenaline and a sense of righteous, protective anger. They weren't just coming for me anymore. They were coming for her life's work, and they didn't even know it. The oppressive silence from my family ended a few days later. It was broken by an official-looking letter that arrived by courier. It was from a law firm I'd never heard of, a fancy one with an address in the city. It was, in essence, a formal demand. It stated that, given the dire family circumstances and my moral and familial obligation, I was expected to cooperate in the sale of the property located at my address. It gave me a deadline, 1 week. After that, it hinted, they would be forced to explore all legal avenues to compel a resolution. Compel a resolution? I read the line out loud to Eleanor, my voice dripping with disbelief. They're threatening to sue me? To force me to sell my home. Eleanor read the letter over my shoulder, her expression unreadable. It's a scare tactic, she said calmly. Their lawyer knows they don't have a legal leg to stand on, but they're betting that you don't know that. They're betting they can bully you into submission. It's not going to work, I said, a new hardness in my voice. I know, she replied, which is why we need our own lawyer. The next day we met with a man named Leonard Miller. He wasn't a slick city lawyer. He was a small-town guy with a sharp mind and a no-nonsense attitude, recommended by one of my clients. We sat in his modest office, the smell of old books and brewing coffee in the air, and laid out the entire story, from the wedding speech to the threatening letter. We also told him about Timberforge innovations. As we spoke, Miller listened intently, occasionally jotting down a note. When we got to the part about Eleanor's company, a slow smile spread across his face. He leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his desk. So let me get this straight, he said, a twinkle in his eye. They think this is just a piece of family land that you, the humble carpenter, are selfishly hoarding. That about sums it up, I said. And in reality, he continued, the land is not, in fact, owned by you personally, but was legally transferred 2 years ago as a capital asset to a multimillion-dollar corporation of which your wife is the founder and majority shareholder? Correct, Eleanor confirmed. Miller let out a low whistle. He looked from me to Eleanor and back again. This, he said, the smile growing wider, is going to be fun. This is a classic case of what we in the legal profession call finding out. He explained that their threats were completely empty. The land was a corporate asset. I had no legal authority to sell it even if I wanted to. Any attempt to force a sale would be thrown out of court so fast it would make their heads spin. So what do we do? I asked. Do we write them a letter back? Tell them to get lost? Miller shook his head. No, we do nothing. We let them make the next move. They've given you a deadline. I suspect that when that deadline passes, they won't file a lawsuit. They'll escalate in a more personal way. They'll show up. And when they do, I want you to call me. I'd like to be there to witness the resolution. Leaving his office, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The dread was gone. In its place was a cold, hard certainty. The storm was coming, but for the first time, I felt like I was the one holding the lightning. The week passed in a blur. I worked in the workshop with a focus I hadn't felt in months. Every piece of wood I shaped, every joint I cut, felt like an act of defiance. Eleanor was on the phone constantly, speaking in a coded language of chemical compounds and market projections. We were a team, preparing our fortress for the inevitable siege. The deadline came and went on a Friday. Nothing happened. The weekend was silent. I almost allowed myself to hope that they had given up, that my father's threats were just hot air. But on Monday morning, as I was calibrating my table saw, I saw them. A procession of 3 cars turning down our long gravel driveway. My father's Mercedes, my brother's now downgraded Lexus, and a third car I didn't recognize, probably their lawyer. They were here. The final confrontation was about to begin. I shut off the saw, the silence it left behind ringing in my ears. I walked to the house, my heart hammering against my ribs, not with fear, but with a wild, fierce anticipation. I found Eleanor by the window watching them pull up. She was holding her phone. It's time, she said, her voice steady. She pressed a button on her phone. "Leonard," she said. "They're here." They didn't knock. My father pushed the workshop door open with a shove, as if he already owned the place. He strode in, followed by my tear-streaked mother, a pale and trembling Marcus, and a stern-looking man in a pinstripe suit carrying a briefcase, who I assumed was their lawyer. Sophia was conspicuously absent. Clearly, she had decided to distance herself from the impending train wreck. This was the scene I'd walked you through at the beginning. The air crackling with tension, the smell of sawdust and desperation. My father, Richard, standing there with the folder, demanding my signature, demanding I sacrifice my life for their mistakes. He slid the folder onto the workbench. "We're done talking, Charles. Sign the papers." Their lawyer stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Mr. Blair," he began, addressing me with professional coldness. "We have here a purchase and sale agreement. A very generous offer has been made by a developer who is eager to acquire this parcel. The funds will be transferred directly to an escrow account to handle your brother's financial obligations. It's a clean solution to a messy problem." "It's not a solution, it's theft," I said, not taking my eyes off my father. "And I already told you." "No." My father's face contorted with rage. "You selfish little fool. After everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I cut him off, my voice rising. "You mean belittle me? Undermine me? Make me feel like a failure my entire life? What you've done is show me exactly what kind of man I never want to be." This is when he turned on Eleanor. "Eleanor, talk some sense into your husband." And this is when she stepped forward, calm and composed, and delivered the line that changed everything forever. "I think there's been a major misunderstanding here, Richard." My father was taken aback by her tone, by the use of his first name. "What are you talking about?" Eleanor walked slowly over to the workbench, placing her hands flat on the smooth wood. "This folder," she said, tapping the contract, "is completely useless. The premise of your entire plan is flawed. You see, you've made a very common mistake. You've judged a book by its cover." She looked from my father to Marcus. "You looked at us and saw a simple carpenter and his quiet wife. You assumed we were poor, powerless, and easy to intimidate." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "You are wrong on all counts." She turned her gaze to their lawyer. "I'm sure you're a competent attorney, so you must understand the basics of property law. You can't sell what you don't own. And Charles," she said, looking at me with a soft smile before turning back to them, "does not own this land. Not anymore." A confused silence fell over the room. Their lawyer frowned. "What is this nonsense?" "The deed is in his name, from an inheritance." "The deed was in his name," Eleanor corrected him smoothly. 2 years ago, as part of the initial capitalization of my company, Charles transferred this property to Timberforge Innovations, LLC as a capital asset in exchange for a minority stake. I am the founder and majority shareholder of that company. Therefore, legally, I control this land. And I can assure you, I am not selling. The color drained from my father's face. Marcus looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Their lawyer's jaw went slack. "Timberforge?" he stammered. "The materials science startup? I've read about them. They're significant." "We are," Eleanor said with a nod. "And that brings me to the second, and far more ironic part of this misunderstanding." She fixed her gaze on Marcus, and her voice became ice. "You see, Marcus, a cornerstone of your investment strategy is to bet against companies you believe will fail. Shorting the stock, I believe it's called. You look for what you perceive as weakness and try to profit from its collapse. It's the ultimate act of cynicism." Marcus started to sweat. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I think you do," Eleanor said. "My lawyers did some digging. They were very interested to learn that the single largest, most catastrophic loss in your portfolio, the one that wiped you and your clients out, was a massive, leveraged short position against an emerging green tech company you were convinced was all hype." She let the silence stretch for a beat. "You bet the farm on the failure of Timberforge Innovations. My company. You tried to profit from destroying my life's work, and in doing so, you destroyed yourself. The confession was written all over my brother's ashen face. He had, in his arrogance and blindness, become the author of his own demise. My father looked at Marcus, then at Eleanor, his mind struggling to process the sheer, poetic justice of it all. My mother just whimpered, covering her mouth with her hand. But the final act of this drama was yet to come. Just then, a sleek, black-town car pulled up the driveway, crunching softly on the gravel. A man in an impeccably tailored suit got out. He was older, with a commanding presence. He walked into the workshop, his eyes scanning the scene with mild curiosity before landing on Eleanor. "Dr. Stone," he said, his voice booming with authority. "Julian Croft. A pleasure to finally meet you in person." He extended a hand. Eleanor shook it warmly. "Mr. Croft, welcome to our humble headquarters." "Humble, perhaps, but the source of genius," he replied with a smile. He glanced at my stunned family, then back at Eleanor. "Is this a bad time? I'm just so eager to sign the final papers for our partnership. A $15 million deal to make Timberforge the exclusive supplier for our new line of sustainable architecture isn't something I wanted to leave to my assistants. $15 million. The number hung in the air, a final, definitive nail in the coffin of my family's arrogance. The look on their faces was something I will never forget. It wasn't just shock. It was the complete, soul-crushing obliteration of their entire worldview. Their notions of success, of power, of who held the cards, it all evaporated in an instant. The lowly carpenter and his country girl wife were not on the bottom rung of the ladder. They were the ladder. This is the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my own life. Thank you for sticking with me this far. You are amazing. Please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below, just so I know you've been with me on this journey. It doesn't just help more people find this story. It lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of my journey. Julian Croft, blissfully unaware of the family drama he had just walked into, was all business. Eleanor, a model of professionalism, led him over to a clean table in the corner, away from the emotional wreckage of my family. They began to go over the documents, their voices a low, calm murmur of contractual terms and delivery schedules. For them, it was a historic day for their companies. For me, it was the backdrop to a silent, devastating implosion. My father stood frozen, his face a mask of gray disbelief. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw no anger, no disappointment, no judgment in his eyes. I saw nothing. It was the hollow gaze of a man whose foundations had been turned to dust. Marcus finally broke. He staggered back and collapsed into a chair, burying his head in his hands. A dry, racking sob escaped his lips. "It's over," he choked out. "Everything is over." Their lawyer, looking deeply uncomfortable, began quietly packing his briefcase. He gave my father a slight, apologetic bow of his head, as if to say, "My work here is done. And frankly, you people are insane." He slipped out of the workshop without another word. As he left, Marcus's phone began to ring, a shrill, insistent sound in the funereal silence. He fumbled for it, his hands shaking. He looked at the caller ID and his face went even paler, if that was possible. He answered it, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Hello, Mr. Peterson. Yes, I know. I'm working on it." "No, I don't have it." His voice cracked. "Please, just give me more time." He listened for a moment, his eyes wide with horror. "No, please, don't call the authorities." He hung up, his hand falling limply to his side. The wolves were closing in. My mother was the first to move. She went to Marcus, putting a trembling hand on his shoulder. She looked up at me, her eyes swimming with a desperate, pathetic plea. "Charles," she whispered. "Even so, even with all this, he's still your brother. You can't let this happen to him. This company of hers must have a high salary. You could still help him." Alone, I felt a surge of something cold and final inside me. Not anger, not even pity, just finality. "No, I said, my voice cutting through her desperate whispers. This was never about money, Mom. This was about respect. And you have shown us none. You came into my home not to ask for help, but to demand a sacrifice. You saw my life's work as nothing more than a cash machine to fix his failures. I walked over to them, standing over my broken brother and my pleading mother. I looked down at Marcus. You didn't just bet against a company, Marcus. You bet against me. You've been betting against me my whole life. You finally lost. I turned to my father, who still hadn't moved. And you? I said, my voice shaking with the weight of years of unspoken pain. You taught him how. You taught him that what I do has no value. You taught him that I was less than him. This is your failure as much as it is his. I took a step back, drawing a line in the sawdust on the floor. Get out, I said, the words quiet but absolute. Get out of my workshop. Get out of my life. The next time you hear from me will be through my lawyer, Mr. Miller, to discuss the formal dissolution of any and all family ties. My father finally flinched, as if I had struck him. My mother let out a small gasp. Marcus just continued to sob. Slowly, painfully, they gathered themselves. My mother helped Marcus to his feet, and they shuffled out of the workshop like ghosts, avoiding the corner where a multi-million-dollar deal was being signed. My father was the last to leave. He paused at the door, turning back to look at me. His mouth opened as if to say something, but no words came out. He just shook his head, a broken man, and closed the door behind him. The silence that descended was profound. It was the silence of a battlefield after the war is over. Julian Croft and Eleanor finished their business a few minutes later. He shook my hand firmly. You have a remarkable wife, Mr. Stone, and a beautiful workshop. I hope we'll be seeing more of your work in our projects. I hope so too, I managed to say. After he left, Eleanor came and stood beside me. She didn't say anything. She just slipped her hand into mine. We stood there for a long time, watching the dust motes dance in the afternoon sunbeams slanting through the windows. The storm had passed. The wreckage was immense, but we were still standing. The 6 months that followed were a blur of activity and a strange, quiet peace. The absence of my family's drama was like the cessation of a constant, low-grade headache I didn't realize I had until it was gone. Life was calm. Timberforge Innovations exploded out of stealth mode. The partnership with Julian Croft's firm put them on the map. Articles were written. Awards were won. My brilliant wife, Dr. Eleanor Stone, was suddenly a sought-after speaker at tech and environmental conferences. My own life changed dramatically as well, but in a way that felt authentic. My workshop became the official research and development hub for Timberforge. I was now head of artisanal prototyping, a title Eleanor and I had laughed about as we made it up. But it was real. I was no longer just a carpenter. I was an artist and an innovator, working with a material that was changing an industry. Architects and designers from around the world were now commissioning me to create showcase pieces with our proprietary wood. My work was finally being seen, valued, and celebrated. We were a team in every sense of the word. Our promotion in life was one we had given ourselves. We heard snippets about my family through the grapevine. Marcus had declared bankruptcy. He was facing multiple lawsuits from his former clients and an investigation by the SEC. They had to sell their mansion in the Hamptons, and my parents had to sell my childhood home to cover his legal fees and a fraction of his debts. They were living in a small, rented condo somewhere. I felt a distant pang of sadness, not for them, but for the family we could have been. But I felt no guilt. One crisp autumn afternoon, I was sketching a new chair design when I saw a small, unfamiliar car pull up our driveway. My guard went up instantly, but then I saw who got out. It was my sister, Laura. She looked nervous, clutching her purse like a shield. I walked out to meet her. Laura, I said, my voice neutral. Charles, she replied, her eyes welling up with tears. Can we talk? I hesitated, then nodded and led her to the porch. We sat on the swing I had built, the one my mother had once called a waste of good lumber. I'm so sorry, she began, the words tumbling out in a rush. I was a coward. I knew what they were doing was wrong, but I was so scared of them, of Dad's anger, of Mom's disappointment. I just stood by and let it happen. I'm so sorry. I looked at my little sister, really looked at her, and I didn't see an enemy. I saw someone who had been trapped in the same toxic system I had been, only she hadn't found her way out yet. I know, I said quietly. It wasn't easy. We talked for over an hour. She told me about the fallout, the screaming matches, the blame, the sheer misery of their new lives. Marcus and Sophia were in the middle of a nasty divorce. The family was completely shattered. They just don't get it, she said, wiping a tear from her cheek. They still talk about you as if you're the one who betrayed them. Mom keeps saying, after all we gave him, they're completely blind. I know, I said again. Then she looked at me, her expression pained, as if she was debating whether to share one final, ugly secret. There's something else you should know, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The reason Dad was so desperate, so completely over the edge, it wasn't just about protecting Marcus or the family name. She took a shaky breath. Marcus had convinced him to make one last, big investment to try and cover the initial losses. Dad took out a second mortgage on the house and gave Marcus almost his entire retirement fund. The money he and Mom had saved for 30 years. The money that was supposed to be their inheritance to us one day. It was all in that same timber forge bet. So when Marcus went down, he took Dad down with him. Completely. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. It hadn't just been pride. It had been pure animal panic. My father wasn't just trying to save his favorite son. He was trying to save himself. His desperation, his rage, his willingness to sacrifice me. It was all born from the terror of his own colossal mistake. It didn't excuse his actions, not by a long shot. But for the first time, I understood them. When Laura left, she gave me a fierce hug. I'd like to still be your sister, she said. If you'll have me. I'd like that too, I told her, and I meant it. That evening, I told Eleanor what Laura had said. She listened patiently, then wrapped her arms around me. It's a tragedy, she said softly. All of it. But it's their tragedy, Charles. Not ours. She was right. Our story was just beginning. It's been a year since that day in the workshop. The late afternoon sun is casting long shadows across the fields as Eleanor and I walk hand in hand down the path towards the old oak tree where we were married. The air is cool and smells of damp earth and possibility. Timberforge is thriving beyond our wildest dreams. But that's not what I think about in these quiet moments. I think about how different my life is. Not because of the money, but because of the peace. The quiet confidence that comes from living a life that is truly your own. My workshop is still my sanctuary, but it's no longer a fortress I hide in. It's a place of creation, of joy. My relationship with Laura is slowly rebuilding, one honest conversation at a time. As for the rest of my family, there is only silence. I don't know if I'll ever speak to them again. Maybe someday if they ever truly understand the damage they caused. But I'm no longer waiting for that day. I've stopped looking for their approval because I've finally found my own. I look at Eleanor, her face bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, and my heart feels full to bursting. We faced the storm and we didn't just survive. We grew stronger. We built a life as solid and as true as the wood I love to work with. Thank you, I say to her, my voice thick with emotion, for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. She stops and turns to face me, her eyes smiling. I didn't believe in you, Charles, she says softly. I knew you. There's a difference. And in that moment, I understand. True value isn't something that's given to you by others. It's not measured in dollars or job titles or the approval of your parents. It's something you build within yourself, joint by joint, day by day. It's about knowing who you are and having someone by your side who sees you, truly sees you, and loves you for it. My family thought I was building birdhouses, but all along, with Eleanor by my side, we were building an empire. A real one. An empire of integrity, of love, and of peace. And that's a fortune no market can crash. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to stand up for yourself against the people who were supposed to support you the most? I'd be honored if you'd share your thoughts in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Your support truly means the world.